Amy at EuroLuxHome.com. Welcome back to our historical overview of the styles of European antique furniture. If you have enjoyed learning about antiques and history, be sure to like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and maybe even share it with a friend who might also enjoy learning about European antiques. So today we're talking about the Art Deco style. But we've learned in order to really understand what a style is all about, we need to look at what's happening in culture and society. So we'll back up a little bit to the last style that we talked about, which was the Art Nouveau style. And I do recommend going and watching our video because it gives you all the details about this very short-lived style, yet it's very unique. It was just from 1890 to 1910, and it was a reaction against the Industrial Revolution, just like the arts and crafts style as well, and watch that video as well. But the Art Nouveau style was just lavish and free-flowing lines that had organic motifs. And it was an emphasis on extreme craftsmanship. And because it took such skilled workers to make these very unusual free-flowing designs, it was very expensive. But the wealthy were wanting something different than all of the Victorian styles that were also prevalent in society at the end of the 20th century. And I do encourage you to go watch our Victorian style as well. That gives you all of the details about that style. So, what happens to cause a fundamental change in the decorative arts and art and culture at this time? Well, we have a catastrophic world event. From 1914 to 1918 was World War I. It was spawned from the assassination of the Archduke Ferdinand of Austria, and it was actually a chain reaction of international alliances that eventually diplomacy failed, and it turned into a global war. Ultimately, 30 countries were involved, and if you count the number of military and civilian casualties, there's estimates of 15 to 22 million people died, and double that amount were injured or wounded during the war. So it really fundamentally impacted the whole world. And by the end of the war, you have the feeling that the old styles of the Victorian, all of the excesses and the ornate carvings, and the Art Nouveau style with its free-flowing, beautiful lines, just were outdated now that we went through this catastrophic world event. And so the old styles just didn't seem to represent this new modern world. It just was no longer the same. And so these old styles just seemed no longer suitable. There really was a desire for a complete break with all historical styles. And I'll give you an example. If we look specifically at art, we have the rise of the Modernism movement, and specifically falling under the umbrella of Modernism, we have the rise of Cubism, led by Pablo Picasso. So if you look at Picasso's arts, you see that in his paintings, he is doing something that's never been done before in art. His art no longer looks like three musicians. Instead, he's trying to present multiple perspectives and multiple angles. And he does that by deconstructing the forms and bringing them down to their basic geometric shapes. So it makes the faces of the figures look rather distorted or fractionated, almost splintered. And we can understand that that's how people were feeling after World War I, was that the world was fractionated, the world was splintered. Nothing had been how it had been before. And so by looking at this Cubist art, it gives us a reflection of what's happening, how people are feeling in society. Now, we also know that this is the age of the Roaring 1920s. And the 1920s were called the Roaring 1920s because it was an economic boom, especially in the United States. After World War I, all of the industries were coming back and just cranking out goods. People were working and they had more money, and there was the rise of credit, offering credit terms to people for the first time. And so people were buying lots of goods, and that created a big demand. It was an exuberant time. If you've ever read F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby, it describes this jazz age, this time of rebellion. And so again, it's people going against these historical norms, just like Pablo Picasso, but now you have young women who were called the flappers, and they wore short skirts, they didn't wear girdles, they wore makeup, and they cut their hair short. And you remember that this was actually the time of prohibition. So alcohol was illegal, but of course, if you make something illegal, people are just going to get it, sneak and get it. So this was the rise of the speakeasy clubs, the jazz clubs that were underground. And so these young women were going out and drinking all night and smoking cigarettes, driving fast cars, and dancing to jazz. So it was just a break with societal norms of how things had been. Now, I'll also mention that in 1922, there was the discovery of King Tut's tomb in Egypt. And like we've seen in earlier times, archaeological exhibitions sometimes create an impact on styles. So we do see an element of exoticism, and even sometimes using Egyptian motifs in the Art Deco style. Now, in 1925, there was, the French government wanted to show all of these new styles that were being developed in France, and so an expo was held. It was called the International Exposition of Modern Industrial and Decorative Arts, and of course that was all in French instead of English. And so when you say it in French, that is how the name Art Deco comes about, is from that exhibition of the decorative arts in France. And so people were seeing this new style as the technology was being shown. And this continuation of this new style was presented at the World's Fair in Chicago in 1933. But really, in order to understand the Art Deco style, we really need to have a fundamental understanding that at this time, people were completely fascinated with technology, the new technologies that were coming about. And people were enamored with speed, and they wanted things to look streamlined and sleek. And this was this part of this new Art Deco style. So what are these technologies that are now suddenly part of culture that's impacting the style of art and architecture or decorative arts? Well, we have the automobiles. So in 1908, Henry Ford developed the Model T. And so now you see, with just like in the Industrial Revolution, Henry Ford used the assembly line as part of his manufacturing process for the Model T. And so that greatly reduced the cost of the car. It made it more accessible to the common man. And so now you have, by the 1920s, a lot of people are driving cars. You also have the rise of airplane travel and aviation. In 1927, Charles Lindbergh did the first solo flight across the Atlantic from New York to Paris. And people just went crazy. It was all in the news, and everyone followed the story. And of course, not to be outdone, we had to have a woman fly solo across the Atlantic. So just 5 years later, Amelia Earhart set off, and she also completed her solo flight across the Atlantic. So people were impressed with these big streamlined airplanes. We also have rail travel happening, locomotives, just traveling at great speeds across Europe. You have the Orient Express going from Paris all the way to Istanbul. Now, we've mentioned in previous videos that we've had the rise of electricity and the light bulb, and now by the 20s we developed neon lights. And of course, a lot of times neon lights brings your mind to the early cinemas, the movie theaters that had the big neon light billboards. And it was really exciting because this was a brand new entertainment, the talkies. So for the first time, we have actually audio in movies rather than silent films. Now you can hear your favorite actor or actress talking. This was also the golden age of radio. In the United States, we have the development of NBC and CBS, and the radios themselves, which soon everyone had in their homes, these radios were made of bakelite, which was a brand new material. Bakelite was the first synthetic plastic, and it allowed so many more consumer goods to be made at much greater affordable prices. Now, this was also the time of skyscrapers. So if we look at architecture, what's happening, we have this architectural technology of steel frames that allows builders to build these gigantic buildings. So much like people back in the 12th century saw the rise of Gothic cathedrals, and they were huge and amazing and dwarfed people. Now the same thing happens here in the early 20th century with the skyscrapers. So in New York City in 1930, the Chrysler Building was built, and the top of it actually looks like the sun radiating. It was gravity defying, and it was the absolute tallest building in the world when it was built. It really was a symbol of human achievement. It showed that man had conquered nature. But just a little less than a year later, the Chrysler Building was surpassed by the Empire State Building, which was just slightly taller. So it took the new record as the tallest building in the world, and it actually held that record for 40 years until the World Trade Center was built in 1971. Pretty remarkable that it held the record of the world's tallest building from the 1930s all the way to the 70s. So the Art Deco style is really a celebration of the machine age. But it's more than just the style reflecting this technology. It truly is a reflection of the fundamental belief in progress. People truly felt that the power of technology was beneficial, and that the future had already arrived and it had come on the wings of technology. So it was almost like a religious belief, this idea of progress, and that led to optimism. There was really a great optimism in society at this time that things were going to get better and were going to be better. So now that you have an understanding of what are motivating the Art Deco style, let's look at some of the hallmarks so that we can truly understand what the style is about. So when you're out antiquing and you see a piece, you might be able to recognize, aha, that is an Art Deco piece. Now, it is important to note that there are two distinct phases of the Art Deco style. There's the early phase and the late phase. So early Deco in the 1920s is marked by strong dynamic curves. Really this idea of velocity and speed you can really see in these swooping curves. And it's important to note that we do have several very famous French furniture designers, Ruhlmann and Leloup, that made some beautiful, gorgeous pieces. We're showing you some pieces here so you really get an idea of what this style looks like. And it's important to mention René Lalique when we talk about the decorative arts of this period. Lalique was a glass manufacturer who actually started during the Art Nouveau period and had some beautiful Art Nouveau designs, but really became more famous when the Art Deco style began influencing. And he created all of these beautiful glass vases and especially beautiful perfume bottles, these multicolored perfume bottles that everyone wanted to have, especially the flappers, to put on their perfume before they went out drinking and smoking all night and dancing to jazz. But this rise in glassware became very popular, and eventually Lalique's designs, whereas at first they were rather expensive because they were beautiful and handcrafted, eventually they were mass-produced, and that's what becomes known as Depression glass. And if you go in any antique store in the US today, you'll see lots of examples of Depression glass in all colors, greens, yellows, pinks. So that's our early Art Deco style. And then once we move into the late Art Deco style, which now we're into the 30s, you can really see the influence of Picasso's Cubism because we have more rectilinear lines and a greater focus on geometric shapes. And those geometric shapes are fractionated. So I'm just going to take a moment here to spin to this beautiful Art Deco bed behind me. It dates right about late 20s, so it's moving into this later phase of Art Deco. And you come up here and see these stylized flowers, but they have more of a fractionated appearance. And you have this straight lines, and we kind of have this zigzag lines. And then I'll point out right here in the middle, this is actually Bakelite. So this is this new synthetic plastic that's meant to look like mother of pearl. Really neat to see a big panel of that. But then finally, I'll bring your attention down to the feet. You have this idea of this curve and the dynamism, the speed of all of the technology, the automobiles and the trains and the airplanes, that curve of the feet, that dynamic motion feeling of the feet. So besides this rectilinear, these fractionated forms, you find zigzags, trapezoids, chevron patterns, and starburst patterns were very popular at this time. You have stylized abstracted flowers like on the bed, also animals, especially in sculptures. There's the use of gazelles or deer or birds. And we also see a bright, bold color pattern in Art Deco. With the decorative arts, you see bright reds and yellows, greens, orange. And for example, I'll show a picture of Clarice Cliff pottery based out of the UK. It's bright colors and it has these geometric shapes and forms to it. And in the US, we have Homer Laughlin's Fiesta ware, which is still popular today. But Fiesta ware had these bright colors, and people could just buy the teapot or in orange and a cup in yellow and another cup in red and another cup in blue. And so mixing and matching all of these bright colors. Now, in 1929, we do have the stock market crash in the US, which led to the Great Depression, which of course severely impacted society. In the US, 25% of people were unemployed, but you still had people really enjoying Fiesta ware because it was these bright, cheery colors. And even though life had become extremely hard due to the Great Depression, there still was this underlying feeling of optimism that things were going to get better, that technology would help make the world be a better place, and that human progress would lead to the next phase. So I hope that you have enjoyed learning about the Art Deco style. It really is distinctive, and when you learn all of the hallmarks and what's happening in society, this rise of modernism, it really is the transition to the new modern world. If I can answer any additional questions for you, please feel free to reach out or leave comments below. Remember to like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and maybe even share this with a friend who might also enjoy learning about Art Deco and other European antique styles. See you next time.